The courtroom doors slammed open with a weight that made every head turn. A hush fell over the gallery, not because of who walked in, but what walked beside him. Officer Nate Holloway, hands cuffed in front of him, beard now ragged from months, in county lockup, walked stiffly in his orange prison jumpsuit. But he didn't walk alone. A German shepherd padded silently at his side, eyes sharp, head high, vest snug against his chest, K9. Maximus. The same dog the prosecution insisted was no longer evidence, the same partner they said Nate had used to commit the crime, and now, the same dog Nate had demanded to testify on his behalf. People laughed when he filed the motion. The judge nearly dismissed it without reading, but something in the paperwork, something about the chain of events, the timeline, the blood detection trail, made her pause, and now, with an army of camera flashes igniting like lightning, outside the courthouse the man branded a traitor to the badge stood before the jury again, but this time, he wasn't alone. Maximus sat beside him, perfectly still, watching the judge with intelligent eyes. No bark, no twitch, just silent readiness. As if he knew, the bailiff grumbled. This is a circus, but the judge lifted a hand. Let it happen. She was old school but not blind. This was no ordinary dog. This was a dog that had once pulled a wounded child from a burning house, a dog that had taken a bullet for a fellow officer during a meth raid, and now, somehow, this same dog was about to defend a man everyone believed was guilty of killing his partner. Nate's voice cracked as he spoke for the first time. Your Honor, may I approach? The judge nodded once. He stepped forward, Max at his heel, and when Nate's eyes met the jury's, the years of service, loyalty, and pain flooded his face like cracks in a dam. I didn't kill Detective Ruiz, he said softly. No one moved. Not even the stenographer's keys clicked, and if I did, he swallowed hard, eyes shining. Max wouldn't still be with me. The courtroom stirred. Someone in the back scoffed, but Max remained unmoving, locked on Nate like a soldier, awaiting a silent command. Nate turned slowly toward the jury box. He was there, he saw what happened, he knows the truth. Silence again, then the sound of a single sniffle from the front row. His mother, shoulders trembling, hand clenched over her mouth. This was not the man she raised. This broken shadow, was someone crushed by accusation, by betrayal, by silence. And yet there he stood, unshackled in spirit if not in body, with only a dog as his witness. The judge exhaled, and for a second, time paused. No one understood how it would work. How do you cross-examine a dog? How do you prove innocence with a canine? But then Nate knelt. He looked Max directly in the eyes. Buddy, he whispered. One last time, okay? Max's ears twitched. Then something happened. Nate opened the duffel bag that had been cleared by the court. Inside, a collection of scent samples from the crime scene. One by one, he laid them out in front of Max, each labeled by forensic techs. The gun, the bloodied glove, the patrol vest Ruiz had worn. Max sniffed them, tail steady. No reaction. Nothing. Then Nate reached inside his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled square of cloth, unlabeled, unsubmitted, hidden, until now. The prosecution jumped. Up. Objection. That was not in discovery. But the judge waved them down. Her eyes were fixed on Max. Nate laid the cloth on the floor in front of him. Max sniffed and instantly froze. The fur on his neck bristled, lips curled back. He growled, low guttural primal, and then he turned, not toward Nate, but toward the prosecution's table. Every eye followed the line of his snarl, straight to the man who had testified 2 months ago that he had never been to the scene. ADA Jared Lewis. The courtroom exploded. Voices. Shouted. The judge pounded the gavel, but Max didn't stop growling. He took a step forward, muscles tense. Nate's voice cut through the chaos, soft, commanding. Max, hold. The dog froze in place, still staring at the man who claimed he'd never touched the crime scene. The cloth, barely visible, had a tiny smear of blood on one edge, and now the entire jury stared at it like it was a dagger from a ghost. The judge leaned forward, face pale. "Mr. Holloway, where did you get that?" Nate rose to his feet slowly. "It was in Ruiz's jacket pocket, the night he died. Max found it the next morning during our sweep of the apartment." He looked straight at the ADA. "I was told not to log it." The words hit like thunder. "By who?" the judge asked, voice sharp. But Nate didn't answer. His eyes never left Jared Lewis, and the ADA, usually smug, always in control, looked as if his heart had stopped. Max still stared. Him down, teeth barely bared, no bark, no lunging, just a silent, terrifying signal. "I remember you." The judge slammed her gavel again. "This court is in recess." But it didn't matter, because in that 1 minute, in that one unspoken testimony, everything changed. People would debate it later. Was it legal? Was it real? Could a dog testify? But no one who saw it would forget. The way Max growled without hesitation, the way he looked into the soul of a liar, the way a wrongfully accused man found his voice, through the one being who never stopped believing in him, and as Nate was led. Back out in cuffs, he didn't look defeated. He looked ready. Because now he had hope, and hope is the most dangerous thing a guilty man can face. 2 years ago, Maximus wasn't a hero. He was a shell, scarred from failed placements. Returned, twice from civilian homes, labeled unmanageable, too aggressive, too intense, too much, until Nate Holloway walked into the K9 training facility with hands in his pockets and pain buried in his eyes. The chief had called it a punishment transfer. A busted-up detective doesn't belong on patrol, they said. They didn't. No, Nate had begged for this. He didn't need a desk. He needed purpose, and he found it in a cage in the back corner of the kennel, where Max sat, still and silent, like a soldier left behind. They'd locked eyes, and something passed between them, something neither could explain. The trainer warned him. That dog's trouble, Nate didn't care. So am I. The first time they worked together, Max disobeyed every order. He bolted, he lunged, he tore a practice dummy to shreds and sat down like he'd done nothing wrong. But Nate didn't yell, didn't pull. He knelt, waited. When Max finally turned to look at him, Nate whispered something only the dog could hear. "I know what it's like to be blamed for things you didn't do." From that moment on, they were inseparable. Max became more than a partner. He became Nate's shadow, his shield, his only peace. They trained day and night, detection, apprehension, scent tracking. Max never failed, never hesitated. They earned top marks in every category. But it wasn't about awards. It was about trust. Max trusted Nate with his life. And Nate. He trusted Max with something even more fragile, his soul. They saved lives together, cracked a child trafficking ring wide open, took down a cartel drug house where every wall hid a weapon, survived a 3-minute firefight pinned behind a cruiser while Max barked like a demon at the darkness. But none of that made the news. What made the news was what happened one Friday night outside a strip mall in East Town. Detective Marcos Ruiz had been Nate's best friend for over a decade. They'd shared shifts, shared beers, shared battle scars no therapist could unravel. But that night, only one of them walked out alive. Ruiz was found shot, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, in the alley behind the store, and Nate, he was standing over the body with blood on his hands, Max beside him. No weapon in sight. He didn't run, didn't speak, just stared into the blinking lights of the patrol cars, stunned and hollow. They booked him an hour later. Max was taken to a city kennel pending investigation. It was supposed to be temporary, but Nate knew what that meant. If he was convicted, Max would be reassigned, sold, maybe even put down. Can't have a liability dog with that much aggression, they said. But Max wasn't a liability. He was. A witness, he was there. And more than anyone else, Nate knew. Max knew who pulled the trigger that night. The only problem? No one believed a dog could tell the truth. In the weeks that followed, Nate's world imploded. The force turned its back on him. The media buried him. Ruiz's family spat on his name. Only one person stayed, Angela Tate, the department's K9 behavioral analyst. She wasn't just a handler. She was the one who helped Nate understand Max. She believed something wasn't right. Max isn't showing signs of trauma, she told the judge during the suppression hearing. If he witnessed Nate commit that crime, he wouldn't be able to stay calm around him. But they ignored her. They always did. Until she submitted the footage, the security cam from the alley's far corner. Blurry, grayscale, silent. 3 figures. Not 2. Nate, Ruiz, and a third man, just a silhouette. The file was lost 2 days later. Case reopened? No, evidence dismissed. Too unclear, they ruled. Angela fought harder. Nate, locked behind bars, barely holding on to sanity, only had one request: get Max out. So she did, pulled every string, signed every form. And one morning, 3 months before the trial, she walked into the jail's visitation room with a leash in hand. Nate stood when he saw them. His legs almost gave. Out, Max rushed forward, tail low, ears perked. No barking, no whining, just that deep, heart-piercing connection, like 2 halves of something finally back together. Angela backed away, tears in her eyes. Max placed one paw on Nate's knee and stared at him like he'd never left. Nate broke, right there, in front of a stone-faced guard. He didn't care. He knelt, forehead against Max's. "I'm still here," he whispered, "still fighting." It wasn't long after that when the idea hit him. Crazy, impossible, desperate, but maybe, just maybe, the dog could speak, not with words, but with instinct, with training, with truth. So he filed the motion. K9. Testimony based on scent identification and behavioral response. Everyone laughed, but the judge didn't throw it out. And now the world watched as man and dog stood together again, not in uniform, but in truth. Angela walked Nate back to the holding cell after the hearing recess. She said nothing for a long time. But before the guard shut the door, she reached through the bars and touched his shoulder. "I've seen 100 dogs break under pressure," she whispered. "But not Max. He's holding on." Nate nodded slowly. "So am I." Angela's hand trembled as she let go. Then she turned to Max, who sat just outside the cell door. He looked at her, then back at Nate. Refused to leave. The guard barked, "Come on, let's move it." Angela raised her badge. "He stays." They locked eyes. She didn't blink, and so Max lay down beside the cell. Paws crossed, eyes on his partner. Still and silent. The judge had said the testimony would continue tomorrow, but Nate already knew what mattered most had been said. Max still believed in him, and when a dog like Max chooses a side, the truth doesn't stay buried for long. The courtroom doors creaked open at 9:02 a.m. People had lined up before sunrise. News vans clogged the sidewalks. Reporters whispered like vultures circling a wounded animal, because today, a dog was going to testify. Max walked in calmly, leash in Angela's hand. No muzzle, no restraint. Just his vest, faded black and stitched with the gold letters K9 Unit Maximus. Nate followed behind, wrists shackled, eyes hollow. But when Max glanced back, just once, something in Nate's face flickered. A breath of strength. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but silence was, and it roared louder than any headline. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Miss Tate, proceed." Angela stood in the center like it was her last stand. She placed a worn hoodie on the ground, Ruiz's, retrieved from evidence. Then she pointed to a second garment, Nate's, she said. Finally, she pulled out a third shirt, unlabeled, unregistered. No one had claimed it, yet it had been found, soaked and discarded in a trash bin near the alley the night of the murder. Max sniffed all 3. He paused at Ruiz's, pressed his snout against it, but then backed away. Nate's, he touched gently, then sat. But when he reached the third shirt, the unknown, Max froze, then snarled. The entire courtroom shifted. Gasps. Murmurs. The bailiff stepped forward. Max barked once. Short, sharp. Angela raised a hand. "He's identifying a hostile." The judge leaned forward. "Explain." Angela turned to the jury. Her voice trembled, but didn't crack. Canines are trained to react based on scent memory. Max was present at the murder. He associates this third scent with aggression, possibly threat, the prosecutor laughed. So now we're convicting. Based on dog barks? Angela didn't blink. We've convicted on less. The judge didn't smile. Continue. Angela gave one final command. Mac, where's the threat? Max turned, head scanning the benches. The tension rippled like lightning through glass. He walked past the jury, past the press row. Then he stopped at the defense seating and growled at Detective Patrick Langston Ruiz's partner, Nate's former supervisor, the man who'd built the entire case against Nate. From day one, Langston chuckled nervously. That dog's nuts. But Max didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe wrong. Angela stepped forward. Your Honor, the defense requests an immediate review of Detective Langston's involvement. Overruled, the judge snapped. This isn't a circus. But the seed had been planted, a room full of doubt, and Langston's smile faltered. That night they moved Max into a secure kennel at the station. Angela didn't sleep, neither did Nate. He sat in his cot, replaying every moment. Langston. Of course. It made sense now. The timing, the way evidence disappeared, how Nate's side of the story was buried before it had breath. Langston was in debt. He'd been under investigation 2 years ago for misusing evidence funds, swept under the rug. Ruiz had found out. Nate remembered Ruiz's cryptic last words that night in the alley. There's more to it. Don't trust... He never finished. Silenced gun does that. But Nate never connected the dots, because Langston had played it perfectly, framed him with just enough truth to make the lie believable. 3 days later, a sealed report landed anonymously on Angela's desk, unsigned. No return label inside? Body cam footage, Langston's from the night Ruiz died. The official version had claimed his cam was inactive. This footage said otherwise. It was muffled, angled wrong. But clear enough to see Langston step into the alley, hear Ruiz's voice. You think I don't know. You used me, Pat. You used us both. Then the gunfire, Langston shouting, Stay down, stay down. But there was no threat, no shooter fleeing. No chase, just silence. Then Nate arriving late, breathless, seeing Ruiz dropping beside him. Marcos, stay with me. Langston had set the scene. After the trigger had been pulled, Angela's hands shook. She forwarded the footage to the DA and prayed. But that night, the betrayal took one final turn. Angela got home around midnight. Her lights were already on. She never left them on. The door creaked open. Inside, wreckage, drawers overturned. Files missing. Her computer smashed. She didn't scream, didn't run. She grabbed her phone, but it was too late. Behind her, the shadow moved. Gloved hand. Cold steel. A voice she'd once trusted. You should have stayed out of it. Langston. He didn't hurt her, not physically. He didn't need to. He threatened Max. You keep pushing and that mutt disappears. No body, no case. Then he left. Just like that. Angela collapsed to the floor. Tears silent. Hands clenched. She'd trusted him once, and now she was staring into the eyes of a man who would kill a dog to bury the truth. She looked at the shattered laptop, then to the closet. Inside, a backup drive. She ran. That drive held everything, and by morning, so would the court. The courtroom was packed tighter than ever. Every seat filled, every breath held. This was no longer a routine trial. It was a reckoning. Angela entered with 2 things clutched in her hands: the uncorrupted backup drive and Max's leash. He walked beside her with an eerie stillness. Not a sniff, not a bark, just pure, locked-in alertness. But it wasn't Max that people looked at now. It was Nate. He had a look in his eyes that scared even the guards. Not violent, not wild, awake, alive in a way he hadn't been since the arrest, because today he knew the truth was coming. Angela took the stand, holding nothing back. The judge had granted a motion for new evidence following the anonymous footage submission. The footage had been verified, time-stamped, unedited and damning. Langston was cornered, but he still played it cool from the back row, arms crossed, wearing a suit that smelled like arrogance. Angela loaded the footage onto the projector. The lights dimmed, and the silence that followed was heavy enough to choke. The grainy body cam flickered onto the screen, Langston stepping into the alley, Ruiz's voice full of heat. "You think I don't know. You used me, Pat. You used us both." Then pop, pop, gunfire. Then Langston's voice again, but not panic, control, manipulation. "Stay down, stay down." But Ruiz was already gone. Angela hit pause. Faces in the room had changed. The jury looked sick. The judge leaned back like the wind had been knocked from his chest. Angela continued. "The timestamp places Langston at the scene 4 minutes before Nate ever arrived. This footage proves he had motive, opportunity, and time to stage the scene before officers responded." The prosecutor didn't rise, didn't argue, because there was no defense left to give. Angela kept going. Ruiz and Langston were both under review for missing funds in a narcotics seizure. But Ruiz was about to come clean. He confronted Langston that night. She paused. Langston silenced him. A ripple moved through the crowd. Angela looked to Max, who sat like a statue beside the stand. Then she turned to Nate. He didn't smile. He couldn't. But his eyes said everything. Then it happened. A moment no one expected. Max stood, uncommanded. He turned toward the courtroom door and growled. Angela's heart froze. Everyone turned. The door creaked open. Langston, leaving early. He didn't. "Make it far. Freeze!" the bailiff barked, stepping into his path. Langston raised his hands, but his expression cracked, because Max wasn't growling anymore. He was walking toward him, slow, deliberate, like he remembered everything from that alley. Angela whispered, "Let him go." The leash dropped. Max padded forward and stopped just inches from Langston, and sat, stared up at him, didn't bark, didn't lunge, just looked into his soul like he'd been waiting for this moment since the night Ruiz fell. Langston flinched. The same man who'd taken lives without blinking now stood shaking, because a dog wouldn't look away. Max finally turned and returned to Angela's side. The message was loud and clear. That night, Nate sat in the holding room. The cell door opened. Angela stepped in. "You're being released tomorrow morning, charges dropped." He nodded, barely moving, but Angela wasn't done. "There's one more thing you should see." She opened a folder. Inside, a photo of a younger man and a younger Max. "Who's this?" Nate asked, confused. Angela hesitated. "That's Max's original handler, Officer Kyle Jensen." "Wait, before me?" She nodded. "Killed during a robbery. Max was wounded, taken out of service. They said he couldn't work again. But when I tested him with you, something clicked. Like he remembered what it was like to trust someone." Nate stared at the photo for a long time, and then he understood. Max wasn't just loyal to him. He'd carried the memories of his first handler, too, and now he had witnessed the same betrayal, the same grief, twice. Yet he still came back. Still served. Still stood. In the hallway, Langston was being escorted away in cuffs. Reporters swarmed, but he didn't speak, didn't look at anyone. Max watched from the far end of the hallway. Quiet. Angela bent down beside him. "You knew, didn't you?" Max didn't move, didn't have to. Sometimes the most powerful testimony isn't spoken, it's lived. Outside, Nate stood under the open sky for the first time in 17 months. Max ran to him. No leash, no vest, just a tail. Whipping like a flag and eyes wide with relief. Nate knelt down, held him tight. No words, just heartbeats and breathing, like they'd both just crawled out of the same nightmare. Because they had. They called it Freedom Day. The press covered it like a redemption story. Wrongfully convicted officer exonerated after canine testimony. But for Nate, it didn't feel like redemption. It felt like a funeral, because something inside him had died in that cell. Something he would never fully get back. He stood outside the courthouse in his old uniform, freshly pressed but outdated, like it didn't belong to him anymore. Max sat at his side, wearing his K9 vest for the first time in over a year, not as a prisoner, but as a partner. The department had reinstated Nate, not because of politics, not for headlines. Because the chief had seen the footage, had watched Max's quiet confrontation, and understood. Sometimes justice doesn't come from lawyers. It comes from loyalty. They returned to the precinct together. Max hesitated at the entrance. So did Nate. So many ghosts here. Memories. Of Ruiz. Of Langston. Of the betrayal that had nearly buried them both. As they stepped inside, officers stopped mid-conversation. Phones lowered. Coffee cups froze in mid-air. No one spoke, until Captain Green, a hard-nosed veteran who hadn't smiled since the 90s, stepped forward and held out his hand. "Welcome home, Officer Nash." Nate shook it without a word. And Max nudged Green's leg and let out a soft whine. Not fear, not confusion. Recognition. He remembered. Green had been the one who pulled him from the bloodied rubble the night Officer Jensen died. Green's jaw clenched. He reached down and rested a hand gently on Max's head. "I never thought I'd see you in this building again," he whispered. Max leaned in. "And everyone else in the room?" They clapped quietly, respectfully, but with weight, because they weren't just clapping for Nate. They were clapping for the dog who refused to forget the truth. 2 weeks passed. Then one phone call changed everything. A hostage situation. Armed suspect. Civilians inside. SWAT was en route, but they needed someone who could de-escalate fast. Someone who knew the building, the back exits, the layout. Nate knew it, like the back of his hand. It had been his old beat. He didn't hesitate. Neither did Max. The scene was chaos. Police tape, reporters, screams muffled behind boarded windows. Inside was a young man, early 20s, strung out and desperate, holding a child as shield. Nate surveyed the perimeter, found the fire escape he used to. Checked during patrol. He turned to Max, crouched beside him. "Silent entry, on my call." Max blinked. Ready. They moved like shadows, through the alley, up the rusted stairs, into the broken side window. The man didn't see them coming, but Max smelled him, even through the sweat, the tears, the terror. He pointed his snout, motionless. Nate raised his service weapon. "Click, not fire, not yet." "Put the kid down," Nate shouted. The man spun, wild-eyed, gun shaking. "I didn't mean to." He ran. "I didn't mean to hurt him." Nate stepped forward. "Listen, no one has to die today," the man sobbed. "I don't want to go to prison." "You won't if you drop it. Look at the kid, he's scared. Just like you." The man trembled, and for a second it looked like he'd do it, but the gun tilted toward the kid. That's when Max launched. No bark, no warning, just a perfect lunge. His jaws clamped down on the suspect's wrist, not hard enough to break it. Just enough to disarm. The child ran free. The man collapsed in sobs as Max held firm. Officers stormed in seconds later. It was over. Outside, the boy clung to Nate's neck, crying. "You saved me," he whispered. But Nate pointed to Max. He did. The child turned. Max's tongue lolled out, eyes kind. "Can I pet him?" Nate nodded. The boy leaned down and kissed Max's forehead. Max stayed perfectly still, as if he understood what that meant. The story exploded across the city. Same dog who helped free his handler now saves child in hostage crisis. But that night something changed. Max didn't eat, didn't move from his bed. Nate noticed the stiffness in his joints, the way he winced stepping off the couch. The vet appointment confirmed it. Advanced arthritis, aggravated spine, injury from his first trauma years ago. The adrenaline from recent events had masked it. But it was catching up now, fast. Angela visited that night, sat beside Max and wept quietly. "He gave everything," she whispered. Nate didn't respond. He just stroked Max's fur and made a decision. A week later, the station hosted a ceremony, not for Nate, for Max. They called it his final shift. Officers lined the precinct steps as Max walked down the aisle in his vest one last time. His badge had been polished and placed on a velvet cushion. Nate knelt down as the chief read the citation. "Max, K9 unit, honored for bravery, loyalty, and service beyond the call of duty." He removed the vest slowly, folded it. Max sat down beside him. No confusion, just peace, as if he knew, as if this was his final act of sacrifice, not the bite, not the rescue, not the trial, but the moment he let go. So Nate could live again. That night, they lay together on the floor of their small home. Max's head rested on Nate's chest. Nate whispered stories into his ear, about their first patrol, about the rookie they made cry from hazing, about the night Max found that missing girl in the snow and refused to leave her side for hours. He talked until sunrise, and Max, he never once moved, just breathed and listened. The house was too quiet, too still, too empty. Nate stood in the doorway, uniform half on, eyes scanning the living room. Max's bed was there, untouched. His bowl hadn't moved. His leash still hung. On the hook, the one he used to race toward every morning, but the sound, the click of paws, the little grunt Max made when he stretched, the rhythmic breath against Nate's side at night. It was all gone. Max was gone. The vet had said he went peacefully, laid down that night, curled up at Nate's feet, and just never woke up. But peacefully didn't mean painlessly. Not for Nate. He buried Max in a quiet field just outside the city. Angela came. So did Captain Green. Even the chief. They folded the canine vest and placed it beside the casket. One of the rookies, a kid Max had trained beside for a few weeks, couldn't stop crying. He was more than a dog, he choked out. Nate said nothing. There was nothing. Left to say, just the silence, the kind that doesn't fade. The department offered Nate desk duty. He refused. He didn't want a badge without Max beside him. He didn't want a gun that didn't lead to something good. He turned in his resignation quietly. No press, no farewell party, just a quiet walk out of the building where his whole life had happened, and a soft click as the door shut behind him. Weeks passed, then months. People asked him to speak about the trial, the injustice, the miracle of a dog bringing down a lie in front of a judge. But Nate always declined. That wasn't the part of the story he wanted to remember. He didn't want to become the man who was saved by a dog. He wanted to remain the partner of one. It wasn't until a full year later that he returned to the courthouse. Same steps, same echo in the marble halls. But this time, he wasn't in chains. He wasn't angry. He was searching. The courtroom was empty. He sat in the back row and just stared at the seat where Max had sat that day, where his stillness had screamed louder than any bark. The judge's voice echoed in memory. Let the record show the dog has made his position unmistakably clear. Nate smiled faintly. No one would ever believe how much Max had understood, but he had. He had. Outside, the city was moving fast, cars honking, people rushing, life speeding forward, but in Nate's chest, time was still. He walked to the memorial wall outside the K9 Division headquarters. Rows of engraved names, fallen dogs. Max's name had just been added. K9 Max. Courage, loyalty, truth. Below it, someone had left a tennis ball and a note in a child's handwriting. Thank you for saving me. I miss you. Nate's throat caught. The hostage boy. He remembered his name now. Tyler. He must have come back, laid this here. Max had left a mark deeper than headlines, deeper than justice. He had left healing. That night, Nate stood in his backyard. The sun had dipped low, casting golden light over the grass. He closed his eyes, and he could almost hear it again. That familiar pant, the soft chuff of breath. And then, just for a second, he felt it, a nudge at his knee, as if Max was there, saying goodbye, or maybe just reminding him, I did my part, now live yours. 6 months later, a letter arrived from a small non-profit working with veterans and rescue dogs. They'd heard about Nate. They needed trainers, people who understood trauma, both human and canine. He read it twice, then a third time, and for the first time in a year, he didn't feel hollow. The new facility was quiet, out near the woods, fresh paint, open fields, hopeful faces. The dogs came from shelters, abuse cases, failed adoptions, just like the people, each one broken in some invisible way, but each one waiting. For a second chance, Nate took a slow breath and stepped onto the training field. A young shepherd pup barked and ran toward him, tail wagging too fast for its legs. He knelt. The dog licked his chin, eager, raw, untamed. But good? Nate smiled, not because it filled the hole Max left, nothing could, but because it gave him purpose again. In his room above the kennels, Nate kept one framed photo. Not of the trial. Not of the moment the charges were dropped. Not even the hostage. Rescue. Just one old picture of Max, asleep on his side, legs twitching, probably dreaming of some far-off scent trail in the woods. He stared at it each night before sleep and whispered the same words, words he never got to say in court, or at the funeral, or when the world was watching. Only here, now. Alone. You saved. May 1st. Final image. A new K9 pup running across the field toward Nate, sunlight behind them. And just beyond the trees, a faint shadow of a German shepherd standing still, then fading into the light.